then it would be unnecessarily cruel to hold yourself, another human being, to a standard of perfection. The reaction they're likely to elicit from you is probably one of concern and compassion. Am I on the right path? Is my research going in the right direction according to the evidence I have and the reasoning that I have? Welcome to How to Be an Adult, a podcast created by the team at the Morpheus Clinic for Hypnosis in Toronto, Canada. We offer practical guidance for people just like you who've inadvertently become adults and don't know what to do about it. Whether you're 18 or 80, this show is the trail guide to life that you didn't get when you gained equality with your parents. We share our thoughts with you in public to democratize self-love, self-respect, and self-assurance. I'm Luke Chow, and in this episode, I'm going to tell you how to stop being a perfectionist. When I think back to how any perfectionistic tendencies within myself could have originated, I think back to elementary school, where I was praised for getting 100% on a math test, or sometimes even an English test, or sometimes even like an art test that is purely subjective. When you're grading an 8-year-old or a 9-year-old, of course, saying that their work is good for their grade level is easy to do, but then no one hangs an 8-year-old's paintings up in the Louvre. So in elementary school, I would sometimes get 100%. I would even get 101%. I would even get 105% if I answered a lot of bonus questions correctly. And then I entered high school, where I might only have gotten one 101% grade in all of my high school. I certainly was not getting 100% consistently. And then I moved on to university, and I went to the University of Toronto, which suffers from grade deflation. And then my grades were average for my cohort at U of T. It's not that I became less intelligent. It's that the people who were surrounding me became increasingly selected from a cognitive elite. And now that I'm in the working world, I'm in industry, as they say, I don't think I've ever produced a perfect podcast. I've never done a perfect hypnosis session you could grade 100%, and I've never written an email that is beyond reproach or criticism if you look at it with a fine-toothed enough comb. The point I want to make is that you can only expect perfection in elementary tasks. If you're doing arithmetic, if you're going back and you're redoing a grade 3 math test, you can expect that probably you're going to get that 100%, right? But at some point in your life, roughly coinciding with adulthood, the things that you're asked to do are not so elementary any longer. The things you're asked to do will be complex enough that no one is expecting or demanding perfection. And if you stop expecting or demanding perfection of yourself, you're making it so that 0 people who are involved are expecting or demanding perfection. In some ways, I'm actually going to challenge the validity of the concept of perfection at all. I'm going to kind of like deconstruct it to point out how it's nonsensical in real world applications. So in this world that is made of atoms and molecules, right? There is no perfect circle that can be drawn. Whether with graphite, whether with a paintbrush or a laser printer or with pixels, not even with a compass can one draw a perfect circle. The circles we say to be perfect circles are revealed to have rough edges once we pull out a magnifying glass, and if a magnifying glass doesn't reveal the rough edges, a microscope certainly will. But life goes on anyway. The waves still lap at the shores. The lights in my home are still on, with no perfect circles in this world to be found. What we find instead are good enough circles, and in matters of artistic expression, sometimes a beautifully expressed circle, such as one painted by a paintbrush. Much of what I've communicated in prior episodes has been about breaking down double standards, where you might have been holding yourself to a different standard than you'd hold a friend or a sibling or a colleague. And if you don't hold others to the standard of perfection because they're only human and we can't draw a perfect circle with anything, then it would be unnecessarily cruel to hold yourself, another human being, to a standard of perfection when not even an AI and sophisticated supercomputer can produce a perfect circle on paper. Your favorite restaurant has 1-star reviews from people who complain the portion sizes are too small because they don't understand fine dining. Your favorite movie has people who got dragged into it and hate it for no other reason than that. Your favorite book probably doesn't have a perfect 5.0 rating on Amazon if it has more than maybe about 20 or 30 authentic reviews. So if your favorite restaurant and movie and your favorite book can all fall short of the mark of perfection or being beyond criticism or beyond reproach, and you can love your favorite restaurant, movie, or book anyway, I would suggest that you as a human being can also fall short of being beyond criticism or beyond reproach and be lovable anyway. So I am challenging this idea of perfection as having any real meaning that corresponds to this world that is made of atoms and molecules where there are no perfect circles, and even creations of great beauty or people who make every effort to do well can be criticized. We can imagine a rock star who abandons the principles of rock, and they become concerned that their guitar's not producing a perfect sine wave. So now, like an audiophile, they're pursuing zero distortion in their guitar. They might end up using a computer program to produce a sine wave, which is totally bland and uninteresting to listen to. We might imagine that this rock musician, in his or her pursuit of perfection, takes all the roughness out of his or her vocals and then tries to sound like a choir boy. This is the pursuit of an ideal that no one's even asking for. In most endeavors, like communication, like relationships, in most of these human endeavors, no one is asking for you to be perfect, and you'd in fact be quite unrelatable if you had the appearance of being perfect. But people are asking for you to show up with your rough edges. People are asking you to show up in this world genuinely, authentically, truthfully. And when you've been hitting these marks, you had to give yourself credit for already hitting the mark that people expect, and without faulting yourself for missing marks that no one even expects. Later on in this episode, I'll speculate as to why I think you might have been doing this, but let me continue to deconstruct the concept of perfection to begin with. In some matters, like anything having to do with nature, the concept of a perfect tree or a perfect cat is only in human minds. It's not found in any tree or cat that one might encounter in nature or in a city. Trees that have been shaped into like those spherical shapes by clippers are not growing according to their nature any longer. Bonsai trees that have been carefully horticultured are not growing in accordance to their nature any longer, and they can't be said to be more perfect just because a human being imposed his or her conception of perfection upon the living thing. But while there are no perfect trees or perfect cats, there are absolutely beautiful trees. There are healthy cats. There are very alive and well taken care of trees. There are also sweet and adoring and loving cats. When the tree or the animal hits these marks, which matter and which are valid, we generally don't fault the tree or the cat for falling short of our conception of perfection. So again, I'm pointing out that you might be upholding a double standard, where to even a tree or a cat, you'll let them grow and be as they are, in accordance with their nature. As long as they're not like artificially constrained or unhealthy, you'll live and let live. But for yourself, you might be treating yourself as someone who's deserving of criticism rather than appreciation when you fall short of some concept of perfection that may not even correspond with any reality in the world out here. I've said this many times in this podcast, but the set of rules by which we treat life are very different from the set of rules by which we treat things, especially manufactured objects. So let's say you buy a new iPhone, and your iPhone comes out of the box with a scratch on it. Well, that iPhone is next to worthless now, and you're going to take it back to the Apple Store, and they're going to replace it. They're going to probably bin it, or they're probably going to sell it at a much reduced price, if they do such a thing. Because objects only have worth or value insofar as they meet that Platonic ideal of a perfect iPhone. But then, if a friend comes to you and they have a scratch on their face or they have a scratch on their arm, the emotion they're likely to elicit from you is not one of rejection or scorn. The reaction they're likely to elicit from you is probably one of concern and compassion. Because when it comes to a friend, you're following the rules for how we treat a living being, a living human being. You don't treat your friends like they're iPhones, where if they come to you with a scratch on them, they're rejectable. Yet, you might have been treating yourself such that if you have a blemish on your face, then you're rejectable or even less than if you don't have that blemish on your face. You might be treating yourself as though if you make a certain mistake, or if in some other way you commit some kind of infraction, that it somehow diminishes your worth as a human being. I've said it before and I'll say it again. Your worth as a human being is independent of whatever criteria you might add on top of your humanity. So we human beings are permitted to be in this world with scratches on us. Earlier I said that if you showed up in this world appearing to be perfect, it will be very difficult to relate to you. The opposite is true too, where if you show up in this world and you do have imperfections, you do have so-called scratches on you, because the people you'd relate to are human beings who also have scratches on them, they can feel like you're like them. They can feel like you're a fellow human being. They can feel like they can talk to you, they can relate to you, they can empathize with you, and they can feel like you can probably empathize with them. You've probably had the experience of meeting someone who put on the appearance of being perfect, and then such a person is totally unrelatable, and maybe even unlikable. And then you find out later that behind the scenes, they're not at all perfect. So let's all just drop the facade. All of us are human. We're born into this world covered with goo. At the end of our lives, we go back to the ground. And that's us. But in between, there's quite a lot of awesomeness to discover and to create and to do. We don't have to be, quote, perfect like we're manufactured products in order to have value, because we're living human beings. The rules for how we treat living human beings apply to you too. It was recently pointed out to me that our limitations, our flaws, our imperfections are where we find room for connection. And it's where we find room for growth. And it's often what friendships are made of. So two people who've gone through a shared, let's say, traumatic experience, like fighting in the trenches in a war, usually form a close bond, not because the circumstances were perfect for friendship, but because they've suffered a shared hardship. You've almost certainly experienced hardship. That doesn't make you damaged. It doesn't make you bad. It doesn't make you discardable or imperfect or flawed. I mean, you are imperfect, but all of us are born that way. Further on the topic of being relatable, being likable, which is something I'm sure you're interested in. Someone who never seeks help from others and appears to be invulnerable is not going to form the intimate, loving connections that someone who does not appear to be invulnerable and seeks help will be able to form. When you permit others to help you, when you permit others to love you despite your flaws, it's going to result in a stronger bond than if you think others only love you for the appearance of perfection or invulnerability. In many of the endeavors you embark upon as an adult, so let's say you become a scientist and you're doing groundbreaking research, or let's say that you become an entrepreneur and you start a company in a totally new field that no one has succeeded in because you invented the technology, or let's say you become a parent and the only thing that is obvious is that so-called parenting best practices need evolution. Well, in these situations, you've found yourself at what I'm going to call the edge of knowledge. And as an adult, if you've done your adulthood well enough, you're supposed to end up at the edge of knowledge in whatever your thing is. Let's contrast this with the elementary school student, the high school student, or even the undergraduate student. Because at these levels, there's an answer key at the back of the textbook. The questions you're asked to answer already have known answers. You're not at all at the edge of knowledge. So the elementary school student is learning the basics of what everyone knows. High school students learn more. Undergraduate students start to specialize and learn things that maybe not everyone knows, but all their professors definitely do know. By the time you get to the PhD level, or you become a research scientist in industry, or you become an entrepreneur or a parent, you're on the edge of knowledge and there is no answer key. There is no consensus as to what the correct answer is. And in these situations, you'd better then turn to your inner world and start asking yourself, am I on the right path? Is my research going in the right direction according to the evidence I have and the reasoning that I have? Or you might ask yourself in business, is my business conforming to the vision that I have of it? Am I serving my clients the way that I wish to, not the way a business professor says I should? Or as a parent, you might be asking yourself, am I successfully filtering the values I've been exposed to only pass along values I want my child to have? And am I filtering out the values I don't want my child to have in my communications with them and the ways I treat them? So when you find yourself in these adult endeavors at the edge of knowledge, the right person to ask, and sometimes the only person to ask, is yourself. Now, if you followed our earlier episodes up to now, this would not be such a daunting thing. We've put forth the claim that adulthood done correctly is empowering and liberating. It is not onerous or burdensome. If it's been feeling onerous or burdensome, it's probably because no one gave you clear enough guidance as to how to navigate these waters, and that's why we decided to make the podcast. So it's only the apprentice who takes her work to the master and asks the master, is it good enough? Is it ready to be exhibited? But the master asks herself, using her own eye, is my work good enough? Is it ready to be exhibited? And even the client doesn't have as discerning of an eye, or the patron doesn't have as discerning of an eye as the master. So if you found yourself as a lawyer, as a doctor, as a professional, probably you're in that position where even your patients or your clients sometimes don't have as discerning of an eye, and they're paying you to use yours. If you're in such a position, Often a natural response is what we call imposter syndrome. It's when you feel like you're a fraud, you're a fake, because you don't have all the answers. Well, here's my message to you. It is preferable to be at the edge of knowledge and not to have the answers than, in adult life, answering questions they can give to an undergraduate student. So while it's true that no one can say that you're doing a A-plus job as a parent, or you're getting 100% as a lawyer, it's also true that you can ask yourself if you're doing well enough according to the standards of how you treat anyone in your situation. If the answer is yes, then the unhypocritical answer to then feel for yourself is yes, you're doing well enough. So when, like the scientist or the entrepreneur or the artist, you're standing on the edge of knowledge and you're looking over the precipice, and then you're asking yourself, do I dare? And then you're following your own inner guidance. One thing to keep in mind is that the answers aren't always found by looking at precedent in the past. When you're on the edge of knowledge and you're to advance your field forward, or to advance case law forward, or to create a new avant-garde art movement, you are expected to break from the past, to break the mold that you came out of. And this, again, is preferable to only repeating what had been done in the past. The concept of perfection, so to form this Platonic ideal or concept of a perfect lawyer, a perfect entrepreneur, a perfect parent, or a perfect anything, it looks at the past, at what used to be or what had already been done. It doesn't look forward to the future. One argument we've advanced in one of our earliest episodes is that it's the obligation of every new generation to sometimes abandon the ways of the old one. And this is so society progresses forward and does not become increasingly constrained. Scientists, to further a paradigm shift, have to abandon some of the ways of the prior generation of scientists. Each new generation of young people, if they're going to create a better future, have to get rid of some of the closed-mindedness of their parents' generation. Again, it's so society advances forward and not backward. The point I want to make is that any concept of perfection, then, it is only descriptive of what used to be. It cannot necessarily prescribe a path forward. And one shouldn't look to one's concept of perfection, which is an amalgamation of what you'd seen before in the past, as necessarily a roadmap for where to go in the future. And this applies in science because they don't award PhDs to people who just retread old ground. It applies to entrepreneurship, where it's usually the groundbreaking companies that tend to get the most traction and market share because they're doing something innovative and something new and something buzzworthy. And that makes the exhilaration of standing on the precipice at the edge of knowledge a good feeling to feel. Again, you don't want to just be answering questions where you can find an answer key. You want to be in a position to delegate such questions and then to solve the kinds of questions that require someone of your prior training and experience and education to further your field or to advance humanity. I don't believe in solipsism. The scientist going for a PhD got the undergrad first and the high school education before that. So I just want to add that asterisk because I believe that one cannot arrive at every truth or every conclusion just by examining his or her inner world, and that it's going to be examining an informed worldview where one can then arrive at sound answers. So if you are a partner in a law firm and all of a sudden your win rate is declining, it doesn't necessarily mean you become a worse lawyer. If as a surgeon your success rate is declining, it doesn't necessarily mean you've become worse as a surgeon. What it means is that by virtue of advancing in your career, gaining more prestige and a better reputation, you are taking on harder cases. You're taking on cases where the answers are not known. You're taking on cases where they can't just delegate it to the junior associate or to the resident. And this is supposed to happen. If you end up in your career solving world-class problems, you're not going to get it perfect. You're not going to have a 100% success rate, and this, I would suggest, is preferable to only solving cases or problems where you can have a 100% success rate. Here's another problem with the concept of perfection. If you're trying to mold yourself into some Platonic ideal of perfection, you are probably erasing your individuality. And I don't really see two ways around this. Because if, let's say, you're trying to make yourself look like, I don't know, Barbie or He-Man, right? Well, these plastic figures that are mass-produced have no individuality. For you to fit the mold, you would be erasing your own individuality. Here's another point on perfectionism, and I'm going to use the example of scrubbing a countertop to kind of illustrate the point. If you know the 80-20 rule, or the Pareto principle, it says that 80% of the results will be achieved with 20% of the effort. In other words, to get up to 100%, you have to do 5 times as much effort as if you only get it to 80%. So, I mean, this 80-20 distribution has been applied in many ways, but applied to the completion of tasks. In many tasks, hitting that mark of 80%, which is an A-, which is more than good enough, it gets the job done. And to spend 5 times as much effort trying to get it up to 100%, if that could even be achieved, is way beyond the point of diminishing returns. There are some tasks where 80% counts as good enough, and then you can move on to the next thing. So for me, for better or for worse, cleaning my countertop, and here's where I reveal my bachelorhood, that's good enough when it's at 80%, and I don't have to absolutely scrub out every little speck of dust. Or maybe something like how I might word a difficult email to someone who I don't want to disappoint but have to disappoint. I could spend 5 times as much effort trying to get the wording just right, or I could spend 1/5 of the effort getting it up to good enough. And once I get it to good enough, then I can move on to the next thing. The thing about perfectionism is that it says if you don't put in 5 times the effort, it's not good enough. Why even try? And that's a really cruel way to treat a person, because your countertop could be clean enough. Your email could be sent if you're hitting that 80% mark with 20% of the effort. Another bit of advice that I have is to totally ignore your inner critic. And I've made this point in prior episodes before, I believe, but your inner critic actually has no opinions with merit. Criticism with merit has to follow from appreciation of the subject matter. So I'm only going to care about literary criticism that follows from people who've read the book. I'm only going to care about music criticism from people who appreciate the genre. I'm only going to care about art criticism from people who've looked carefully at the painting and understand the context. Because otherwise, the criticism is literally just noise and a distraction from people who are trying to appreciate the subject matter. Now, your inner critic, similarly, is like the Rube in a gallery saying, oh, my 5-year-old could have made that Picasso, and doesn't actually have opinions that would improve you as a person. Now, we understand we can't even train a dog by criticizing all the things they're doing. We have to train the dog by saying, well, here, look at this really cool thing that we're going to do instead, and when you do this thing, here's a reward. We'll teach a child, well, here's how we do it. Let's do this other thing instead. And we understand, generally, I hope, that the child doesn't even know what to do if you only criticize them. But possibly earlier in your life, if you grow up like in the 20th century, You might have been exposed to caregivers who didn't understand this. And then if you didn't want to disappoint them, you might have internalized their unfair criticism so that in criticizing yourself first, you would be spared their criticism. So that's my theory as to the origins of most people's inner critic. Now, what I have my clients do is to just take their inner critic and stuff it in a box labeled devil's advocate, do not trust, not your conscience, not a truth teller, because that's an accurate label for that incessant voice of negativity that can't cast light on anything. You want to make room instead for the thoughts that can appreciate you, even thoughts that love you, and even thoughts that adore you, which are not going to make you into this spoiled, self-centered, arrogant brat. What these thoughts tend to do is illuminate you in the light that most people already see you in, at least the people who stick around in your life. So if you see yourself through a lens of appreciation, even love or adoration, then you can see how the closer members of your family see you. Then you can see how your friends see you, and probably they've not been deceived. Probably their views of you have some validity. I am making the claim that a lens of appreciation and love clarifies, and a lens that is quick to judge or to criticize distorts or even obstructs your view. And when you turn that criticism inwardly, you aren't seeing yourself as you are, you're actually seeing yourself as you're not. Last episode, I made the point that a correct view of the idiomatic or proverbial glass is that it is half full, because only a half full view has you looking at the entire point of the glass in the first place. That other view is distracted from the point of the glass in the first place. So here I'm making the point that only a lens of appreciation can have you look at what is. Your inner critic so often was distracting you by ways you're not, how you could be instead. So your inner critic, it's not a finder of fact, it's not your moral compass, so stuff it in a box, label it devil's advocate. If you ever have a use for fault finding, you can listen to what it has to say, but in most of life, you have little use for fault finding. And if you're just trying to get something done, then a clear look at what you have in front of you allows you to account for what you've got and then take action from there. In closing, here's a point that I'd alluded to that I'm now coming back around to. And it has to do with where perfectionism might be coming from. Sometimes we hang on to our perfectionistic tendencies thinking that they serve us, that they're going to make us the best that we can be, that they're going to protect us from the criticism or the rejection of others. I would suggest an alternative view, and this is just through understanding many case histories over the years. Perfectionism and a sense of low self-worth seem to go hand in hand. Part of the reason I'm encouraging you to let go of your perfectionism is because if it is indeed a manifestation of low self-worth, I don't want to further or enable your sense of low self-worth. Instead, I'm going to return to a few points you've heard me make probably too many times, but these points do merit repetition. You have worth because you're a living human being. This is the unhypocritical view. Where you add to society, where you're in service to others, where you contribute to the world, you can feel additionally proud, additionally that you're contributing, additionally like you're acting in a pro-social manner. But at baseline, just relaxing in your home, you have worth as a living human being. Perfectionism cruelly implies that you don't have worth as a human being and that you're like the iPhone that had better come out of the box without a scratch, which is, as far as I can tell, categorically incorrect. So The things I say, I don't just say to be nice. The things I say, I say to be factually accurate. And the fact that you're listening to this now means I already know you're a living human being. Don't try to deny it. As such, you get to be imperfect. You get to allow yourself room to grow into. If you're still breathing, there's probably another breath, there's probably a tomorrow, and there's probably a next year. For most people listening, there's probably a next decade for you, and for many people listening, you're going to see the second half of this century. So given that there's so much room to grow into, let's leave room for the future you to keep learning more, to keep developing, to keep figuring things out. It releases you from any obligation to be already in your final form, or to know everything, or to be able to do everything. Again, it's the iPhone that comes out of the box perfect and degrades from there, but life doesn't work like that. The way life works is we kind of start in our least formed state, and then we become increasingly further developed until one day when our life ends. When that day is nowhere near, you again have zero obligation at all to think you ought to be in your final form. Here's my final prescription for perfectionism. The way to overcome it is to recognize where you are already hitting the mark. Are you already genuine and truthful? Are you already loving, pro-social? Are you already trying your best, engaging in good faith? Are you already conforming with best practices? Are you already doing well enough that others are recognizing it? Because if you are, you can give yourself credit for hitting the mark and hitting the marks that matter without faulting yourself for falling short of the illusory mark of perfection that no one hits anyway. I'm Luke Chow. If you like the kinds of things I've said on this podcast and you want my help to internalize these ideas on your own, I would first advise you to listen to this episode more than once. And if you still need my help, contact the Morpheus Clinic for hypnosis at www.morpheusclinic.com. My team will be happy to set you up with a free consultation. We'll write you a treatment plan, and then we can work with your particular issues, and we can help you overcome the challenges you're facing to internalizing these ideas. For more content like this, you can follow us on YouTube at Morpheus Hypnosis, or search for How to Be an Adult on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever else you get your podcasts.